Jai Gurudev, and thank you for joining us today. So let's begin our discussion on the satsang which was held at the Prince Academy. So can you describe the atmosphere at Prince Academy School in Jigni village when Gurudev arrived and the significance of him adopting a temple there? Yeah, the day or the evening, His Holiness Gurudev Shri Ravi Shankarji arrived at Prince Academy School in Jigni village will forever be etched in the collective memory of the region. The school grounds, nestled amidst the rustle charm of a traditional village, transformed into a vibrant spiritual amphitheater. Students, teachers, parents, panchayat leaders, temple trustees, and villagers from surrounding Anikol Taluka areas rushed toward the dais to witness the revered master. The moment he stepped in, a palpable silence mixed with divine joy descended, not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of reverence, expectation, and surrender. Row after row of bright young faces shone like oil lamps waiting for oxygen, eager for wisdom, guidance, and blessing. When Gurudev announced that he had adopted a temple in that very land, an emotional wave ran across the gathering. Adoption of a temple by a guru is not merely administrative guardianship, it is karmic consent to nurture the spiritual energy of the land. The land of Jigni is linked historically to ancient seer traditions that valued both well being and liberation. By choosing to take responsibility for a temple, Gurudev was signaling a revival of that same Vedic principle. The body is a temple, the land is a temple, and spaces of worship must be protected so that culture and nature rise together. For villagers, the physical dimension of the event was infrastructure development for a sacred land and space. The spiritual dimension was subtler yet more powerful, a master consecrating the land by touching it with his lotus feet. The temple now becomes a field of regenerative faith where doubts dissolve naturally. Children began to see the deity not as myth but a presence. Adults saw the promise of collective care. Leaders saw the template for model governance rooted in dharma. The adoption also means future homas, satsangs, yogic practices, meditation circles, and environmental reforms centered around the temple complex. All these Gurudev explained later in the message. In his message, he help remove fear, nurture faith, purify environment, and unite villages through seva, sankalpa, and spirituality. The temple became the seed of a new village renaissance, both physical and metaphysical. Now, Gurudev mentioned that 85% of our thoughts are worries from a psychological and spiritual perspective. How transformative is this idea for young minds? Jagadev and Gurudev shared the statistic that 85% of human thoughts are anxious or worry oriented. He wasn't simply narrating psychology, he was diagnosing humanity. Imagine a generation raised under constant cognitive noise of exams, identity, career, future, social validation, finances, fear of failure, relationships. When a master stands before a school and reveals that the majority of what they fear never actually manifests, it recalibrates the self image of children. They begin to separate reality from rumination. Psychologically, this statement works like a mirror shattering a hallucination. Suddenly, the threat no longer looks as big as the mind painted it. Spiritually, it does something more profound. The Vedic sages always said serenity and cheerfulness as signs of high prana. Gurudev backed their ancient observation using modern scientific articulation, merging Jnana Yoga with neuroscience. To a young student, the realization is this: my thoughts are not my truth, they are visitors. Most are imaginary, only a few need action, almost none need panic. Once this clarity settles, they experience fear liberation, which in Sanskrit is called Abhaya, a state Vivekananda himself celebrated. Now, but the deepest transformation is devotion. When the mind accepts only 0.5% is beyond me and belongs to God, the ego loosened its grip and faith gains ground. Meditation then is no longer a task or breathing exercise, it becomes resting with trust, surrendering the torch of worry to divine intelligence. Young minds grasp something key here. Meditation is not escape, it is execution of trust. This idea removes doubt, dissolves decision paralysis, strengthens cognition, and empowers emotional self regulation. Children walked away that day not burdened by an academic sermon but uplifted with a spiritual equation of mind. A generation that realizes worry seldom manifest grows into adults who worry less, yet act more, trust more, and celebrate life more. Now, Gurudev defined temple prasada as a grace that makes the mind joyful. Can you expand on how grace becomes nourishment for both body and mind? Together in India, we often reduce the idea of prasada to a sweet or fruit packet handed out after worship. Gurudev dramatically elevated the definition. Prasada is the energy of grace that feeds the heart and liberates the mind from fear, doubt, and worry. When you go to the temple or to a guru, something shifts biochemically. Devotion releases dopamine, lowers cortisol, steadies heartbeat, and relaxes breath. What looks like emotional upliftment is actually physiological regulation, spirituality touching biology. Now, grace is nourishment for the body because a serene mind signals safety to the nervous system. Digestion works better, sleep improves, immunity rises, inflammation lowers, posture relaxes, facial muscles soften, and endocrine glands secrete healthfully, and prana flows without obstruction. A stress system is contracted prana, a grace-filled system is expressed prana. That is why after satsang or Guru Darshan, even the body feels lighter through the burden and removed was from the mind. Now, for the soul, the grace is far subtler. It is nutrient for courage. Gurudev said, the experience in the temple gives the feeling the Divine Mother protects me and grants fearlessness. Fearlessness is not absence of challenges. It is the inner conviction that we are not alone. This sense of protection spiritually inculcates and inoculates security. Over time, grace produces the sthir buddhi or the stable intellect, the prasanna chitta or the cheerful mind, the dridhat sankalpa or the strong willpower, and anahat bhakti or the pure devotion, which acts like spiritual protein for the soul's journey toward liberation. Thus, grace feeds the body by balancing the system and feeds the soul by freeing it from fear. It is a fruit for the world because a person nourished by grace spreads cheer effortlessly. Gurudev was giving villages and students a universal secret. Devotion feeds health, meditation digests worry, and cheerfulness is evidence of divine nutrition in circulation. Now, Gurudev said meditation is resting with trust. How does that differ from ordinary rest? The ordinary rest is physical, sitting down after exhaustion. Meditation is existential, sitting down without existential exhaustion. Ordinary rest happens because you are tired. Meditation happens because you are wise. When you simply sleep or sit, the mind may still run around doing calculations, replays fears, future projections, regrets, and unfinished tasks. The body sleeps, but the mind remains standing like a guard on night duty. Now, meditation is resting its interest, which means the mind consciously decides to sit down before the body demands it. This is spiritual rest. It is resting in the lap of divinity, not merely resting on the chair or bed. Trust changes neural pathways. The moment we trust creation, the sympathetic nervous system switches to parasympathetic mode. Breath becomes rhythmic. Blood pressure normalizes. Heart coherence improves. The brain shifts to a receptive, intuitive frequency. Thus, meditation is not just rest, it is reset. In spirituality, we call this Shraddha Purvak Viram, or pausing the mind with faith. Gurudev explained mathematically in school language 85% worries never manifest, 14% are manageable, 0.5% is God's domain. So, meditation is handing back the tiny portion to God while refusing to become hostage to the 85% imagination. That is resting with awareness. Meditation also nourishes prana. Just like fire persists because of oxygen, human life persists because of prana lamp burning inside. Sleep rests organs, meditation rests identity. Sleep digests fatigue, and meditation digests fear. Sleep refreshes cells, meditation recharges the transmitter, the 30 trillion cells whose electricity responds to awareness. So the difference is this: ordinary rest is horizontal comfort for the body, meditation is vertical comfort for the soul. One is a tiredness based rest, the other is truth based rest. Gurudev taught the children that day that the deepest rest is stress materialized breathing, meditation. Now, the lamp analogy was powerful. Why is the lamp lit even at death? And what does it teach about living? Neither the lamp exists symbolically across time and Indian consciousness, from birth rituals to temple worship to final rites. Gurudev explained that the body is like a lamp burning with oxygen, while life is the flame burning with prana and consciousness at death. When relatives light a physical lamp, it is not a farewell gesture. It is declaration of the truth that the light inside the person never belonged to the body and never dies with the body. The lamp in the cremation ground is an arrow pointing inward, saying, Here ends form, here continues light. This analogy also teaches how to live. If the lamp is well supported with oxygen, it burns steady. If our life is supported with oxygen and meditation, it burns serene. The sages describe serenity and cheerfulness as virtues of a spiritually enlightened living. The lamp doesn't ask, will wind come? It simply keeps burning. Gurudev invited children to do the same. Resolve to die smiling means resolve to live smiling. Living smiling means not adding one more anxious lamp to the environment of the throne. If at death our lamp is still shining inside the hearts of others, it means we gifted joy while alive. The lamp reminds us that fearlessness comes from recognizing the inner light. It teaches that worry drowns flame, surrender steadies it. The lamp also inspires seva. At death, we light it to honor existence. In life, we must light others through childhood education, parental cheer, leaders of seva, priests of soma sankalpa. The takeaway is death is not darkness, it is light stepping out of the wick of body. That is why even farewell rituals invoke flame, because flame is eternal teacher, quietly repeating Gurudev's message. Living must be celebration, dying must be celebration, and the key link between the two is surrender based cheerfulness. Now, Gurudev urged villagers not to burn plastic because it harms lungs. How important is spiritual leadership in environmental reform? Environmental reform without spiritual leadership becomes activism. With the spiritual leadership, it becomes worship. When Gurudev said, do not burn even a small plastic packet, it causes a huge lung damage and contributes to cancer. He wasn't giving a civic instruction, he was giving dharma for the atmosphere. Indian villages historically respected nature because nature was divine extension. Rivers were mothers, trees were deities, cows were Lakshmi, earth was Bhudevi. Pollution wasn't chemical then, it was karmic violation. Modern times replace sacred ecology with convenience ecology, and convenience breeds carelessness. Now, a spiritual leader catalyzes reform because people trust those who transmit compassion, not command. When a master speaks on air quality, even villagers who are not scientists become partners because the solution isn't framed as protest, it is framed as protection of collective prana. Spiritual leadership combines fear liberation with responsibility. People no longer fear nature's damage, they protect nature from damage. Now, when plastic is burnt, the lungs suffer. When negligence is burned, the soul suffers. Gurudev linked both. His appeal came from pain at seeing rising mental illness, disease, drugs, and pollution. This makes the community realize that environment is not separate from inner wellness. The farm, the forest, the temple, each is organ of a larger cosmic body. Thus, planting panchavati or composing plastic, refusing to burn toxins, practicing yoga daily are not just environmental acts, they are collective upasana or service to creation. When Gram leaders adopt such ideation under spiritual guidance, reforms scale faster and smarter because they are rooted in Shraddha, Seva, and Sankalpa. Gurudev wasn't trying to discipline villages, he was trying to protect future lungs, minds, and inner lamps. That's the power of spiritual ecology. Now, Gurudev proposed planting a Panchavati. What are the actual benefits of such a tree cluster physically? Jagadev, Panchavati is not a mythic forest from the Ramayana. It's a practical environmental capsule developed by India's ecological wisdom. The traditional Panchavati includes trees like banyan or oxygen rich, neem or antibacterial and people or 24-hour oxygen emission, tamarind, mango, jackfruit, and others. Gurudev urged Graham leaders to plant these clusters because they form the lungs of the village. From a physiological perspective, Panchavati produces the high oxygen index, especially people and people banyan pairing, cleans particulate matter, the broadleaves trap dust, purifies the air microbes, neem disinfects the atmosphere naturally, lowers temperature, the banyan people cool land by evapotranspiration, the filters pollutants, deep roots absorb toxins from soil and air and increases groundwater. The banyan people improve the water table, enhances immunity for residents. For residents, the phytonicide emissions act like vitamins, reduces lung stress. Villagers breathe easier, decreases carbon load, improves the AQI locally, supplies fruit economy. The mango jackfruit enrich nutrition, but the unseen physical gain is mental health. Better air means better brain oxygenation. Better oxygenation means better cognition and emotional balance. The emotionally balanced minds mean a less chance of drug abuse, depression, and aggression and impulsivity. Panchavati is preventive public health. Thus, Panchavati is not charity to trees, it is charity from trees, giving oxygen, immunity, fruits, water balance, shade, and calm by design. That is what Gurudev meant when he said plant as many as possible. It protects health, it is village yoga for atmosphere. Now, what are the spiritual benefits of planting Panchavati beyond environmental health? Now, the spiritually Panchavati is an antenna for us. Gurudev said, we have 30 trillion cells emitting subtle electricity, making us transmitters and receivers. Trees also emit the bioelectric fields. A Panchavati cluster interlocks these fields, forming a meditative buffer zone for the village. That is why seers choose forests with tapasya because collective pranic presence accelerates serenity. The spiritual benefits include increased prana density, supportive for meditation, the sacred atmosphere, trees become silent deities, the natural fear liberation zone, faith rises automatically, encourages the Guru Seva because temple and trees grow together, the boosts the sattva, serenity and cheer increase, deepens the gratitude practice, the nature itself inspires reverence, supports the Homa energy, trees stabilize fire rituals metaphysically, builds community unity, collective caretaking becomes vrata, emotional healing presence, trees absorbs the stress vibrations, acts as smriti sadhana, remembering the Rishi culture. This Panchavati is not plantation, it is a spiritual atmosphere upgrade, bridging bhakti, Raj Yoga, and Karma Yoga quietly through chlorophyll. The trees breathe for you, and in meditation, you breathe with the trust for them. That is, and this is a spiritual reciprocity. Now, how does yoga and meditation help in preventing the mental illness, as Gurudev expressed me about it? Gurudev's emotional statement about rising mental illnesses was not pessimism, it was compassion in urgency. The psychosomatic health is single circuit, polluted air stresses lungs, stress lungs stress the brain, stressed brain stresses the behavior. Yoga and meditation are fear vaccination and oxygen for cognition. Yoga regulates the neuroplasticity, improves the vagal tone or the emotional resilience, synchronizes hemispheres, reduces cortisol, and improves the GABA secretion or calming a neurotransmitter, enhances the sleep wake cycles, balances hormones, releases mental stagnation, and improves decision confidence. Meditation digests the identity pressures, the yoga digests the physiological pressures. Combined, they create mental immunity that prevents anxiety disorders, depression, impulsive tendencies, and addiction susceptibility, emotional instability, and psychological burnout. Now, Gurudev said that the body is a temple worthy of care. How should youth interpret it in real daily practice? Youth must replace the body image with body reverence. Reverence breeds care. Care breeds discipline rooted in love, not insecurity. Interpreting the body as a temple means feed it clean, the sattvic nutrition, keep it strong, the pranayama and the shakti kriyas, keep it serene, the meditation daily, protect it from toxins, the drugs, the plastic fumes, and addictions, use it for seva. Volunteers grow spiritually stronger. Temple's care is a respectful discipline, not cosmetic obsession. Gurudev wanted you to understand that one day the body returns to earth, but while alive, it must be honored, energized, and purified and used as instrument of dharma. Now, what is the spiritual gain of attending satsang according to Gurudev? The spiritual gain is fear liberation, doubt dissolution, emotional detox, prana upliftment, devotional nourishment, and mental rest with trust and joy propagation. Gurudev clarified you leave satsang taking away your fears, doubts, and worries as fruit or the phala. This is deeper than blessings. It is a psychic unburdening through presence. What are the physical benefits experienced when someone visits a temple or guru? They reduce anxiety, better heart coherence, steady breath, digestion improvement, hormonal balance, improved sleep, enhanced community, and reduce inflammation, the mental lightness, and emotional calibration, and physiological calm because devotion signals safety to the system. How does meditation increase willpower, which can help you thus say no to drugs? Meditation strengthens the inner transmitter, the mind. Strong transmitter means strong signal or strong decision. Willpower increases when doubts fall, energies rise, and mind rests. Fear dissolves, identity relaxes, and consciousness sharpens. That is why meditation creates a no power, no just willpower. How does environmental care become part of a spiritual practice? Together, because prana is collective currency of creation, the toxic air is equal to toxic mind, clean air is equivalent to the clean transmitter. Don't burn plastic is not civic rule, it is ahimsa to atmosphere. planting Panchavati, Seva to cosmic body, both are spiritual ecology. Now, why should we resolve to die smiling, and what does it spiritually anchor? It anchors liberation from fear, celebration of existence, completion without guilt, life without regret, and devotion without doubt, service without expectation, and mind without weight, and exit without sorrow. Now, how do trees spiritually stabilize the homas and the chants in villages? They absorb the excess heat, harmonize the pranic field, stabilize the subtle vibrations, become receivers of mantra sound, create sattvic atmosphere, act as silent witnesses that amplify the sankalpa energy, and balance space for fire rituals. Now, how are ancient seer values reflected in art of living today? They're through serenity, devotion, the Homa Sankalpas, the pranayama, meditation, environmental ethics, community seva, yogical power building, fear liberation, and mental health focus and joyful governance. How does gratitude lighten the mind scientifically and spiritually? Now, the gratitude releases oxytocin and dopamine, lowers the stress hormones, relaxes the sympathetic overdrive, shifts identity pressure, and improves the heart coherence, deepens devotion and increases surrender, reduces the mental weight, and improves sleep and strengthens the cognitive calm. How does meditation connect youth to fear liberation or abhaya on spiritual path? Negative meditation removes the imaginary 85% worries, handles actionable 14%, surrenders 0.5 to God, builds faith and steadies the prana flame, aligns identity and dissolves doubt, relaxes ego, increases intuition, and anchors divine companionship in mind space. Now, what is the ultimate message that both institutions, the art of living and the Vedic themselves, wish to spread to villagers through this event? Together, the ultimate message is civilizational resurgence to dharma driven governance, yoga for well being, meditation for fear liberation, and tree clusters for environmental health, mantra and huma for spiritual strength, education for willpower, and pollution refusal as ahimsa, community unity as seva, and seeing body and land as temples, nurturing cheerfulness as spiritual evidence, and converting worry into trust. Now, Gurudev connected the village development with dharma, yoga, and ecological responsibility. How does this integration build a future ready model of rural transformation? Gurudev always teaches that development becomes sustainable only when the roots are spiritual and the branches are ecological, social, mental, and economic. In Jigni village, by adopting a temple and addressing the youth and leaders together, Gurudev demonstrated a prototype of rural 5.0 transformation where outer progress and inner evolution walk together like the two rails of a train. The adoption of the temple is symbolic governance. It becomes a hub that radiates a cultural identity, congregational meditation, mantra, energy, and community seva. It ceases to be just a building of stone and becomes a living institution powered by human commitment. Now, this integration is future ready because it counters the three biggest rising rural threats mentioned by Gurudev and Dr. Nagendra: the disease burden of diabetes, cancer, BP, the climate damage, polluted air, plastic burning, and mental addictive collapse, depression, drug abuse, and anxiety driven thinking. Yoga and pranayama improve the oxygen circulation, which protects the lamp body. Panchavati planting protects the oxygen outside, which protects the lamp life of the village itself. Meditation protects the mind, reducing the 85% psychological toxicity of worry that exhausts young cognitive fields and drives impulsive coping mechanisms. The mantra, the mudra, the bandha, the jnana, the bhakti, the seva, all are complete system interventions, not fragmented wellness practices. Now, when a village adopts dharma plus meditation, transparency improves in leadership. When yoga becomes the daily rhythm, the public health improves without medical dependence. When nature is protected by Panchavati forests, the AQI becomes breathable again. When plastic burning stops, lungs don't breathe poison disguised as convenience. When anxiety shrinks, the willpower rises. And addiction loses the psychological territory. Youngsters feel rooted, proud, fearless, present. Leaders feel responsible, serviceful, balanced. Elders feel cared for. Children feel empowered. Environment feels protected. This is rural evolution with emotional sincerity, intellectual discipline, and divine companionship. That is how integration becomes future ready governance, where culture heals mind, the worship heals fear, the yoga heals the prana and the body, Trees heal atmosphere and gratitude heals identity. Now, if meditation is psychological oxygen that sustains the inner flame, what techniques and daily structure should be institutionalized in rural schools and homes? Gurudev made meditation simple through analogies, so structure should be equally simple yet powerful. In rural schools, meditation cannot feel like an elite urban luxury. It must feel like natural birthright. Institutionalization means not preaching meditation but scheduling it. Every school day should include three-stage pranayama plus bhastrika for metabolic lung and nervous regulation. The Shakti Kriya or the short Kriya processes for emotional resilience. The Mudra Bandha awareness as cognitive stabilizers for hyperactive minds. The 1 minute guided meditation every day, like Gurudev did at the event. Gratitude expression before meditation to lighten identity pressure. Home should adopt the no worry policy after dusk. Don't carry anxious lamps into sleep. The puja or the lighting acknowledging inner light with a sankalpa. No burning plastic under any situation. Temple plus tree cluster care routine as family dharma. Evening satsang, bhajan or mantra circle at least weekly. Meditation must be the identity rest button before the body demands collapse. A youth must be taught that courage is inner chemistry, non-mental aggression. Elders must be shown that calm parenting is emotional inheritance, not indulgence. Leaders must know that clean atmosphere is administrative duty as well as karmic duty. Teachers must know students cannot absorb education if prana is contracted. That is why we chant Om Bhadram Karnabi before knowledge, auspicious oxygen for ears and cognition. Meditation doesn't fight anxious thoughts, it stars them by denying a psychological oxygen. So, schools must teach breath regulation, emotional regulation, impulse control, surrender, reverence for nature, devotion for cognition, gratitude for identity, and silence for inner lamp awareness. When institutions adopt these, villages don't just become drug free or disease free, they become fear free, which is the highest rural freedom a society can gift itself. Now, the event involved dignitaries from many villages. How does spiritual authority differently impact community leaders compared to conventional political messaging? A politician inspires action through promise, a spiritual master inspires through presence. The difference observed in Jigni was striking when Gurudev praised India's rise under service oriented leadership. It was not partnership or partisanship, it was contextual reassurance that well being is not anti modern, prosperity is not anti spiritual, and yoga based national willpower is civilizational strength. Political messaging often competes, spiritual messaging complements. Politics drives, divides by agenda, dharma unites by care. Community leaders listening to a spiritual master experience the ego reduction, less personal anxiety, more collective sankalpa, the responsibility expansion, environment are equal to collective lung system. The impulse regulation don't burn plastic as ahimsa, the vision upgrade by plant Panchavati as legacy, not photo op, unity instinct, the satsang as community mental detox. Unlike conventional speeches, the message was not what will I gain if I lead better, but rather what will others lose if I do not lead better. This is guilt free leadership, not pressure based governance. Spiritual authority inspires honesty naturally because divinity becomes witness. In politics, the crowd asks for results. In spirituality, the leader asks for sankalpa. That is what makes it different. Gurudev wasn't asking for votes, he was asking for resolve, which is stronger social currency than a political demand. That is how spiritual authority uniquely transforms leaders. Now, Gurudev addressed the drug abuse, diseases, and pollution in one flow. What makes this holistic messaging effective for societal healing? Jagadev, holistic messaging works because suffering is holistic. The lungs inhale toxins, the mind feels unsafe, and the youth seek escape. Willpower weakens, the addiction territory expands, diseases rise, and leadership stress rises. Environment worsens, and mental illness rises. Social collapse accelerates. It is a single circuit breakdown. Could they reverse the circuit, stop burning plastic to lungs, stop inhaling poison? The plant Panchavati atmosphere starts producing oxygen. Practicing of pranayama, prana flame gains fuel inside. Meditate daily. Anxious cognition loses oxygen. Attend satsang. Fear, doubt, worry dissolve collectively. Increase willpower. Addiction loses psychological ground. Gratitude practice. Identity pressure dissolves. This message is effective because it doesn't treat symptoms separately. It treats root prana, root ecology, root psychology, and root dharma governance. Healing becomes preventive, not reactive. The holistic message gives children both inner strength and outer environment as a support system. That is why it works. Villages don't heal in hospitals, they heal in lifestyle collective Sankalpa ecosystems, which Gurudev activated on that very field. Now, how does seeing the body and land both as temples shift the mindset for civic responsibility? If the body is a temple, you don't inject toxins into it. If the land is a temple, you don't burn poison on it. A temple mindset shifts identity from exploitation to reverence. In cities, a civic sense is rule based. In villages, it is devotion based. When devotion is awakened, responsibility becomes effortless. Discipline, not forced compliance. Youth stop treating their body like a disposable object. Leaders stop treating the environment like a secondary problem. Parents stop burning worry into daily psychology. Priests stop seeing ritual as only spiritual and begin seeing it as ecological vibration stabilizer. This is identity recalibration. When space becomes worshipful, the accountability becomes spiritual. That is the power of temple mindset in civic action. Now, Gurudev guided a 20-minute meditation, although it was in Kannada for gratitude. Can such micro meditation impact the larger consciousness accumulatively? Yes, Jai Gurudev, because electricity is invisible yet impactful. As Gurudev explained through the 30 trillion cell analogy, meditation is subtle electricity of consciousness. 1 minute of awareness repeated daily becomes 365 minutes a year, which is 10 years, makes it 3,650 minutes. A lifetime converts it into transmission tower of serenity. Thus, micro meditation impacts the cumulative consciousness, cellular electricity, emotional field harmonization, the neurochemical balance, fear liberation, devotional deepening, and subtle karmic upliftment of space. The village evolution happens not in hours but in seconds, repeated sincerely. Now, what is the role of Vedic Dhamma Sansthan in supporting the adopted temple through ritual energy and Sankalpa infrastructure? The Vedic Dhamma Sansthan provides the karmic infrastructure, Homa Sankalpas for willpower building, the mantra energy transmission through ritual cycles, the Vrata discipline for community collective consciousness, space vibration stabilization, and generational anchoring of Dharma through fire rituals. The adopted temple becomes not just spiritual heritage but collective sankalpa generated, supported by Homa conduct, mantra chanting, and Ayurvedic lifestyle ethics. That is the role played in dharma propagation from such events. How does mantra chanting differently affect the bioelectric system that Gurudev referenced? Like the sound is vibrational, vibration is bioelectric signal. Signal impacts the cellular electricity. Electricity impacts the emotional and cognitive field. Cognitive field impacts decision. Decision impacts character, and character impacts the karma. Mantras restructure vibrational geometry of the inner transmitter. That's why chanting produces the fearlessness or bhaya, cognitive clarity or buddhi, emotional calm or the prasannata, community unity or the sangha shakti. Mentally noisy frequencies dissolve, intuitive frequencies rise. That is the science plus spirituality of mantra on bioelectric pillar system. Now, Gurudev expressed pain about increasing mental illness. How should community compassion convert into ground action? The pain is not endpoint, it is trigger for seva. Compassion must turn to daily yoga schedules in schools, meditation minutes in homes, tree legacy called Panchavati, all over India and all over the world, no plastic burning pledge, and mental hygiene through satsang, willpower education for youth, and drug-free sankalpas. This ensures villages become clean, healthy, joyful, fearless, ideal, model ecosystems of dharma. That is how compassion becomes action, not sentiment. So, what is the philosophical depth of Shraddha plus Virama equation Gurudev gave when he talked about 0.5% God domain surrender? It is essence of Raja Yoga mastery through surrender. The Shraddha is trust. Virama is pause when you pause without trusting. It is hesitation when you trust without pausing. It is restlessness, but trust based pause is meditation. Philosophically, 85% imagination dissolve, 14% actionables handle, and 0.5% divine surrender. This is a worry free dharma equation of identity. Spirituality doesn't remove problems, it removes the false ownership of problems. That is the depth of that equation. Now, what is the spiritual chemistry behind visiting a guru or temple, and how does it directly influence fear in the modern youth context? Jagadav Gurudev transformed a village school address into an emotional scripture when he explained the concept of receiving prasada. He said that prasada is not limited to a fruit placed in the hand, but actually the grace placed in the heart. When youth visit a temple or sit in the presence of a guru, something invisible yet impactful moves into them. Devotion alters the breath before meditation does. It naturally tells the nervous system that we are in a safe field, and the mind begins to drop its imaginary armor. Modern youth, whether it is villages or megacities, carry fear not because life is dangerous, but because their internal transmitter is constantly in alert mode. When spiritual presence enters, the transmitter shifts from defense frequency to receptive frequency. That is spiritual chemistry, where students become the solvent that dissolve fear. Now, you today fear public failure, academic rejection, career unpredictability, social judgment, and environmental collapse, health insecurity, and psychological fragility. Gurudev cut through that internal chaos by giving them a truth equation. Most worries never even take physical form, so the mind should stop giving them psychological oxygen. But fear dissolves faster when the heart accepts divine companionship than when intellect accepts statistical reassurance alone. This is why guru or temple visitation is powerful. It uses bhakti to purify Raja Yoga, so meditation becomes possible without struggle. When the heart feels protected, the mind becomes fearless. Fearlessness is not bravery fueled by aggression, it's confidence fueled by softness. On the spiritual path, liberation from fear becomes the first liberation because only a smile that isn't defending anything becomes capable of surrender, capable of meditation, capable of leadership, capable of saying no to harmful influences, and capable of rising without internal resistance. That is the real chemistry Gurudev ignited in Jigni. Now, Ayush institutions and Indian Yoga Association are collaborating for drug-free and healthy villages. How does yogic discipline strengthen the mind of a student differently from moral enforcement? Jagadev, what impressed the community most was that Gurudev and Dr. Nagendra never moral police the students, they mind upgraded students. Historically, addiction or drug abuse prevention in schools took the route of moral instruction, threat warnings, or shame based counseling. But threat creates secrecy, shame creates rebellion, and enforcement creates resentment. Yoga works differently. It builds the inner muscle of decision, not just the outer mask of obedience. When a student practices breath control, bandha awareness, and meditation, their nervous system becomes trained to pause before reacting, which is impulse control by cultivation, not by scolding. Yogic discipline increases willpower because it first increases prana availability. Prana is not emotional motivation, it is bioelectric stamina. When prana is low, will is weak. When prana rises, decision rises. Now, in villages, children are connected to community and deities to culture. When discipline is introduced to yoga, the mind begins to cooperate because the change is not forced but felt. Yoga gives the student a sense of ownership of their own inner strength. Once they feel in control of their breath, they start feeling in control of their reflections and reactions. Once they feel control over reactions, they gain control over habits. This is why India's yoga movement is scaling. It is complementary to national leadership and not competitive to personal freedom. Yoga does not say don't do drugs or God will punish you. Yoga says strengthen yourself daily until drugs no longer attract you. One is restriction, the other is maturation. Restriction is temporary, maturation is permanent. Villages don't need policing, they need empowerment. Empowerment doesn't happen through command, it happens through inner electricity of the cells. When mental clarity rises and emotional cheer takes over worrying frequency, that is how yogic discipline works like an antidote without resembling a prohibition. Now, Gurudev compared the humans to transmitters and receivers powered by 30 trillion cells emitting electricity. How does this metaphor scientifically validate the spiritual transformation? This analogy played a crucial role because it placed meditation inside biology, not outside it. Gurudev didn't separate spirituality from physiology. Instead, he explained that every cell emits electrical signals, and collectively we behave like signal towers that both broadcast and receive vibrations. Science validates what seers discard experientially. That serenity is not mystical mood; it is a measurable cellular harmony. When someone meditates, the electric chatter of the mind quietens, the heart field becomes steady and the breath becomes rhythmic. Prana moves freely and decision confidence increases and the emotional body stops defending itself. What was poetic in ancient scriptures became accessible in a village school ground because it was expressed as physics of existence, not myth of existence. Now, from this perspective, spiritual transformation is scientifically validated because the electrical system of the body is not imaginary. We do feel its impact when the mind is anxious. The field around the person becomes noisy and others feel disturbed. When the mind becomes light, the field becomes calm, and others feel naturally drawn, protected, or emotionally regulated in that presence. That is electricity being felt without being seen. This is how meditation becomes more than psychological rest. It becomes a bioelectric reconfiguration. When millions meditate, villages improve. When villages improve, nations improve. When nations improve, the planetary prana improves. Now, the genius of this metaphor was that it gave students permission to stop believing every anxious thought their brain generates because thoughts are like electrical impulses firing inside 30 trillion cell hardware. Some impulses are useful, most are not threatening. Almost none deserve panic, and very few belong to God dedicated surrender zone. Meditation then is not passivity but switching to a higher frequency of trust. This is why the youth felt the metaphor proven, not preached. Now, what is the role of Homa and Mantra ecosystems in maintaining the energy of the adopted village and surrounding villages? In Vedic culture, energy is not random, it is invoked, channeled, sustained, and redistributed to community well being. When Gurudev adopted a temple near Prince Academy School, it was understood by everyone that the next phase would not be mere structural renovation but energetic regeneration. Homas and mantra chanting serve as mechanisms to purify space vibration, stabilize prana fields, and strengthen inner resolve. Unlike modern infrastructure projects that change the external, a Homa ecosystem changes the atmospheric consciousness around external. Mantras, when chanted repeatedly in a sacred space, convert sound into spatial geometry. This spatial geometry becomes a subtle girding that protects the mental clarity, steadies breath, and amplifies the collective sankalpa. In villages, when people meditate, chant, or offer fire rituals, the land receives it like nourishment. Trees receive it like frequency, sound frequency, water. Minds receive it as calm frequency, air. Homas help ensure that the temple remains a field where people feel protected even before spiritual concepts fully integrate intellectually. The Diya metaphor Gurudev used now continues ritually too, reminding everyone that inner consciousness is eternal flame and outer life must be protected from toxic neglect. Now, the role of the Vedic Dharma Sansthan is to make this ecosystem continuous, community accessible, and sankalpa driven, so the adopted temple becomes a nucleus around which people meet, meditate, celebrate, reset, heal, and resolve together. The mental illness, pollution, youth addictions, and chronic disease susceptibility. These are space based breakdowns as much as mind based. So, the adopted temple is now meant to become space based, a solution supported by mantra homa cycles, not separate from rural health but inseparable from it. Now, how can the meditation become foundational training for emotional resilience instead of being treated as a symbolic brevity? The meditation looks brief by clock but not brief by impact. When Gurudev demonstrated in Jigni was spiritual elegance, transformation without time intimidation, in school children often reject what looks long, difficult, or effort heavy, but their minds willingly accept the short intuitive resets that gives instantaneous experiential relief. A minute repeated daily becomes a lifetime habit, and habit changes the neuroelectric wiring more permanently than short term inspiration does. Now, when Gurudev asked everyone to meditate for a few minutes in gratitude, he introduced a model where mindfulness is small in duration but large in consequence. This teaches you that meditation is not leisure for retirement; it is emotional hygiene for adolescents. Emotional resilience is the ability to not be kidnapped by negative thought loops. By revealing that 85% of worries don't materialize into full reality, Gurudev effectively denied legitimacy to overthinking frequency. Meditation then becomes a reprieve where youth plug back into presence rather than projections. Now, the minute achieved a powerful shift in children. Shoulders relaxed, faces softened, the breath deepened, and nervous systems loosened from performance pressure. Eyes closed without resistance, and silence entered without awkwardness, a sign of emotional safety, replacing emotional defense. The minute validated their inner transmitter strength, giving them a micro experience of how it feels when identity is paused, mind is serene, and breath is rhythmic, ego is quiet, and stress contracts dissolve, and intuitiveness begins to function without force. So, this minute in is foundational training because it was not symbolic brevity, it was physiological access point for serenity, which accumulatively becomes spiritual stamina when repeated sincerely. Now, Gurudev urged the villagers to collectively pledge against burning plastic. How does it pledge become spiritually accepted as a seva, not restriction? Neither the psychology of a pledge depends on who gives it and how it is framed. When Gurudev asked villagers to not burn plastic, people instantly accepted it because it sounded like concern, not command. He framed it as ahimsa for lungs and atmosphere, a duty coming from love for community health, not anger or fear of penalty. When something is treated as ahimsa, it becomes compassionate refusal, not mechanical restriction. Seva is action that protects the collective prana. Burning plastic pollutes lungs, polluted lungs burden families. Burden families weakens youth will, weakened will invites addiction. Gurudev reverse engineered the environmental pledge, making people see that what looks like ecological discipline is actually mental and familial protection in villages. People care for deities and nature the same way by preventing neglect, not by punishing behavior. That is how a pledge becomes seva, spiritually accepted act of caring for the land's prana, like caring for one's own breath. Now, how does a adopted temple become a seed of community mental hygiene in rural settings? Neither a temple adopted by a living master ceases to be a museum of faith and becomes a laboratory of emotional healing. Community mental hygiene happens when people gather in a non judgmental environment where vulnerability isn't weakness. That is why satsang dissolves fears naturally. The adopted temple is seen because it becomes a regular field for silence, chanting, listening to wisdom, devotional release, community bonding, leader accountability, environmental vows, and inner reset. Just like a forest houses tapasya, temple houses the collective prana purification which uplifts the mental hygiene silently, consistently, culturally, and compassionately. Now, how should the Panchavati leaders practically convert this inspiration into long term village sankalpa movements? Jagadev, leaders should treat this event as legacy initiation, not event closure. Long term Sankalpa movements begin when leaders stop seeing Seva as occasional charity and start seeing it as identity by making sure every child meditates daily, every home lights no worry lamps, and every village plants Panchavati forests. Leaders expand responsible governance. Long term Sankalpa happens when leaders adopt mental hygiene schedules, ecological pledges, the fire ritual cycles, and youth empowerment frameworks that feel like emotional upgradation, not enforcement. This is governance powered by resolve, not pressure, legacy, not slogans, health, not hospitals, and prana, not panic, and community, not competition. Now, how does the mantra enable problem ownership release even when a problem still exists naturally and externally? Mantra doesn't remove the exam, but it removes the existential panic about the exam. It doesn't stop the future, but it stops feeling attacked by the future. It doesn't remove problems, but removes the feeling that problems are attacking identity personally. Mantra shifts the transmitter from self occupied anxiety to divine occupied confidence. That is problem ownership release, where the boundary between problem and identity dissolves and only action remains. Not panic, not worry, not ego pressure. This is how the youth gain emotional freedom without losing practical awareness. Now, what is the shared vision of both Ardafi and Vedic Sansthan wish to scale nationally based on this prototype? Jagadev, both these institutions share a single vision: fearless youth, healthy body temples, oxygen rich villages, pollution free lungs, seva driven leadership, intuitive minds, devotional nutrition, mantra stabilized ecosystems, and meditation invited consciousness scaling into national identity, not seasonal inspiration. They want villages that don't just function mechanically but breathe spiritually, think cheerfully, act responsibly, respect nature, honor the body, propagate dharma through collective resolve, and grow forward without inner resistance. The vision is not anti modern, it is modern without fear. Not anti political, it is political without ego. Not anti medical, it is medical without dependence. Not anti environmental, it is environmental without protest tone. And not anti spiritual, it is spiritual without escapism. This is the shared vision seed Gurudev planted on the Prince Academy ground that day, a seed meant to become roots of model villages and branches of an ideal nation. Now, Jagadev, so the wisdom talk emphasizes that 85% of our thoughts are worry based. How does the art of living and Vedic themselves and practically help reduce this modern epidemic of unnecessary fear and anxiety? Gurudev, His Holiness Gurudev Shri Shri Ravi Shankarji always frames worry not just as a mental habit but as a biological disruptor. When the mind fixates on imagined problems, our sympathetic nervous system stays active, sending constant stress signals to the heart, lungs, digestion, immunity, and endocrine system. This is why anxiety today has physical signatures: high blood pressure, irregular breathing, gastric issues, insomnia, hormonal imbalance, and even chronic inflammation. Art of Living counters this at the root through rhythm and breath. The flagship Sudarshan Priya creates a predictable cyclical breathing pattern that resets the vagal tone, signaling safety to the brain, along with the three-stage pranayama and bastrika. We shorten the worry cycle by replacing it with controlled hyperconscious breath cycles. Meditation techniques like Sahat Samadhi meditation and guided meditation, relaxation teach resting with awareness, a state where the mind feels protected without effort. We don't suppress worry, we metabolize it through breath, silence, emotional release, and satsang, and knowledge detox to discourse. A regular art of living practitioner gradually shifts from being a reactionary mind to a responsive mind. Studies inside our program show that even a 10-minute rhythmic breath routine can reduce cortisol and revelation significantly, emotionally significantly, and satsang softens the mind by replacing calculation with the connection. Doubt dissolves faster in a field of collective meditation than alone. By practicing these kriyas daily, the practitioner learns the difference between real problems and mental exaggeration. Once that difference is clear, fear automatically loses power. Now we work in the same direction but complemented through sankalpa, sound, fire, and sacred space. Homas like Agnihotra inspired temple homas and Panchavati establishment rituals are not superstition, they are psychological anchoring tools. When a person sits before fire with mantra, the mind experiences a cognitive surrender moment. It realizes, I don't have to control everything. This is essential today when every human is conditioned to overanalyze. Mantras used in our rituals, including protective Vedic chants, do three things. They regulate breath implicitly, they slow brainwave oscillations, and they trigger trust circuits through devotion. The temple that Gurudev adopted at Chigni becomes more than a structure. It becomes a mental immune system for the village. When people visit regularly, their anxiety doesn't spike, it disperses. The act of prasada distribution after rituals teaches a neurological lesson: grace is received, not chased. Faith reduces fear not by belief alone, but by repeated experience of protected space. Mantra, vibration, meditation, and the shared sankalpa that the leader or guardian is present. Our homas cultivate willpower, community responsibility, and inner stability, the very strength anxiety tries to erode. When meditation and mantra meet fire and collective resolve, the worry drops rapidly because the individual stops carrying the world alone. The burden becomes shared with the divine, the community, and the practice itself. That is, and this is the real model of a fear free living that Gurudev advocates. Now, Gurudev compared the body to a lamp that burns as long as oxygen is present and also called a body a temple. How do both organizations help people treat the body with dignity while balancing material life, devotion, and spirituality in a rural context like Jitni village? Take then the metaphor of the body as a lamp and temple is deeply practical. A lamp needs oxygen, fuel, and care, not panic. Gurudev's message reframes health from fear of disease to celebration of the body in rural areas. The challenge isn't lack of devotion, it is lack of systems that embed healthy habits into daily life. Art of Living bridges this by making yoga and breath part of routine village culture rather than just a school activity. Our programs teach that asanas tone the body, pranayama tunes the life force, and meditation protects the mind, which indirectly protects the body. When children learn rhythmic breathing, their concentration improves. When adults practice bhastrika and three-stage pranayama and lung capacity expands, circulation improves, the metabolism stabilizes, and the mind becomes more disciplined. The rural life involves labor intensive activity, which is already beneficial physically, but stress and addictions are silently rising. By integrating yoga into morning or evening community practice sessions. The body gets systematic detox, flexibility, energy regulation, and prevention based care. We also empower local volunteers to hold weekly satsangs, wellness satsangs, where diet awareness, breathing exercises, emotional resilience, and meditation happen together. When the body is respected through breath and movement, spirituality becomes effortless because prana flows freely like oxygen to the lamp. People begin to feel that health is not the absence of illness, but the presence of energy, enthusiasm, clarity, and inner joy. Now we uphold the same dignity for the body but reinforce it through sacred ecology, mantra discipline, and fire principles. In villages, a temple is the strongest symbol of community identity. When Gurudev adopted the temple near Prince Academy at Jigni, it signaled that divine space exists to uplift the human space, including bodily well being. Our homas and Vedic rituals purify the environment, regulate breath naturally through mantra, and cultivate reverence toward the physical form. The Panchavati plantation is especially strategic. Trees like neem, banyan, mango, and people provide oxygen, herbal immunity support, shade, and ecological healing. This protects lungs, skin, immunity, breathing ease, and mental serenity simultaneously. We also educate households to stop plastic burning, which directly impacts lung cancer and air toxicity, and encourage waste burial or compost methods instead. Alongside this, chanting before fire builds discipline, detoxes stress, enhances willpower, reduces addiction vulnerability, and reminds every practitioner that the body must be maintained pure if the soul is to shine bright. Material life, devotion, mantra, and environmental responsibility are not opposites. Together they fuel the lamp that burns clean, lives purposeful, and finally departs this world smiling, as Gurudev beautifully advised. Now, the talk highlighted village leadership and Gurudev's adoption of a temple. Why is it powerful when a spiritual leader adopts a rural temple? And how do both organizations, the Art of Living and the Vedic Dhamma Sansan, ensure this act transforms the individual behavior, school culture, and village governance rather than remaining symbolic? Jagadev, when Gurudev adopts a rural village, it sends a multi-layered signal. It tells the community that spirituality isn't detached from development, it is the source of it. Rural temples historically guided the rhythm of village life. Festivals, collective prayer, community meetings, value transmission, and moral accountability. Over time, modernization shifted these from experience based wisdom to schedule based survival. Gurudev's adoption revives that original role and makes it contemporary, but the power lies not in the adoption itself but in what follows. Art of Living ensures transportation and transformation by embedding practice pipelines in Prince Academy at Jigni. We don't leave meditation as theory. We train teachers, parents, and student leaders to lead breathing, science, silence, and emotional self regulation drills every day. When schools host yoga, pranayama, Sudarshan Kriya inspires breath rhythms, and gratitude led meditation assemblies, children become custodians of inner stability. We also identify village youth committees to collaborate with local panchayats to organize monthly wellness dialogues, addiction prevention workshops, and ecological responsibility drives. This shifts leadership from rhetoric to responsibility. When leaders meditate together, decisions become less impulsive, less ego driven, and more community centered. Anxiety reduces not just in individuals but in leadership behavior. Our approach ensures that the temple functions as a stress free inspiration center, not merely a festival venue. Now, from the governance perspective, adoption of a village temple becomes powerful because it creates a sense in the center of collective ethic. Every vision statement, the clean village, the addiction free youth, the health ecology needs a place where people repeatedly feel accountable to it. We operationalize this through rituals that anchor the mind, environment, and policy culture. The weekly homas and Vedic chanting programs in the adopted temple create collective pause and cognitive surrender, the realization that personal habits impact the whole village. We supplement this with structured initiatives, the Panchavati plantations for oxygen and immunity, anti plastic burning awareness for lung health, and school centric mantra and meditation modules for willpower building. We also work with village heads to create Sankalpa driven governance, resolutions taken not in aggression but in clarity. A vow made in peace is harder to break than a vow made in emotion. When a village leader participates in a homa or a meditation, their leadership identity shifts from possession based to care based. The adopted temple becomes the behavioral headquarters powering value execution, environmental discipline, mental health resilience, physical well being, and governance integrity, thereby turning a sacred structure into a sacred system. The Gurudev emphasized that the mind carries 85% worry and anxiety. How can meditation and yoga reduce the mental illness prevalence in villages? Jagadev Gurudev's insight about mental activity reflects both psychological and physiological reality. In rural villages like Jigni, modern pressures such as exam stress, career uncertainty, and social comparison have quietly reached even children. Meditation and yoga provide structured training to regulate these pressures. Daily practice of Sudarshan Kriya or Bhastrika balance the autonomic nervous system activity, reducing cortisol, stabilizing heart rate, and increasing the parasympathetic dominance, which creates a natural sense of relaxation. Children practicing meditation, 1 minute meditations, cultivate attention control, reducing the propensity for anxiety spirals. Breath based kriyas enhance oxygenation and pranic flow, simultaneously improving metabolic balance and mental clarity. The yoga postures or asanas strengthen body mind integration, making emotional fluctuations less impactful. Importantly, this approach prevents the mental illness rather than merely treating symptoms. The village ecosystem benefits as families see more emotionally resilient youth, less quarrelsome households, and improved school performance. The mind becomes an instrument of creativity rather than fear. Now, complementing this, Ayurvedic rituals and temple based practices provide a collective mental stabilizer. The homas, or mantra chanting, and congregation based meditation anchor consciousness in a positive field. When youth and adults participate, they experience cognitive surrender, the realization that not all events are under personal control. The Panchavati plantations, clean air initiatives, and fire rituals reinforce the principle of interconnection between environment, body, and mind. This holistic integration decreases triggers for stress induced disorders, encourages community bonding, and establishes routines where spiritual discipline reduces pathological worry. Over time, villages witness lower prevalence of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse because the community itself sustains mental hygiene as a shared value. Meditation and ritual become preventive medicine, nurturing both the mind and environment harmoniously. Now, how does the concept of prasada go beyond material offerings to create fearlessness in practitioners? Gurudev emphasized that prasada is not just food or fruit, but grace and joy transferred from a higher consciousness into the mind. Receiving prasada after meditation or temple worship creates a psychological effect. It signals that the universe, the deity, and the guru are aligned with your well being. This produces a physiological relaxation response, stress hormones decrease, breathing steadies, and heart rhythm normalizes, and neural circuits linked to fear diminish. The practitioner experiences subtle but real protection feel, which translates into confidence and courage in daily life. For children, even a simple act of receiving prasada after meditation builds trust in systems beyond their control, teaching surrender without passivity. In the Vedic context, prasada represents the energetic realignment. When performed in the temple after homas and mantra chanting, it carries the vibration of protection, stability, and auspiciousness. The collective energy of chanting, fire, and mindful offerings produces a field in which fear is not nourished. Villagers experience subtle immunity from negativity, which gradually manifests as fearless action, calm decision making, and emotional resilience. Prasada becomes a bridge from devotion to empowerment, teaching that courage can be cultivated internally, sustained externally, and transmitted intergenerationally. Now, Gurudev mentioned planting Panchavati to reduce pollution. How does integrating ecology into spiritual practice impact the village health? Either in villages like Jigni, ecology and health are inseparable. Gurudev's call for Panchavati planting of banyan, neem, peepal, mango, tamarind, and jackfruit combines spiritual symbolism with the practical outcomes. Trees improve oxygen levels, reduce carbon, provide shade, and offer edible nutrition, strengthening immunity. Yoga and meditation practices become more effective in cleaner, oxygen rich environments. Children learn that care for nature is care for the self, reinforcing stewardship as a daily practice. From the Vedic perspective, each tree in the Panchavati is considered a deity, embodying a protective energy. Rituals performed near these trees enhance spiritual awareness and promote harmonious environmental management. Communities experience cleaner air, lower respiratory illnesses, and strengthen mental clarity, making ecology a living extension of a spiritual practice rather than an isolated task. How do breath based practices like Bhastrika and three stage pranayama enhance willpower among students? The breath directly regulates the nervous system activity. The Bhastrika energizes, releasing stagnant energy, while the three-stage pranayama balances the sympathetic and parasympathetic dominance. Students practicing these develop self-regulation, sustained attention, and delayed gratification, essential elements of willpower. Complementing this, the mantra chanting during homas aligns breath with sacred sound, reinforcing discipline. Villages witnessed reduced impulsivity among youth, aiding education, health, and community responsibility. Now, how does meditation cultivate faith and trust in divine timing rather than impatience or worry? The meditation trains the mind to observe thoughts without attachment. When students witness worry dissolve naturally during practice, they internalize trust. This nurtures faith and that outcomes unfold appropriately, reducing impulsive, fear driven decisions. In temples, a collective meditation and mantra reinforce surrender, making patience a shared experience. Faith strengthens as both internal cognition and external rituals align, producing a village culture that trusts processes rather than panics. Now, Gurudev spoke about diseases like diabetes and hypertension. How does yoga act as a preventive medicine? The physical postures improve circulation, balance metabolism, regulate insulin sensitivity, and reduce inflammation. Coupled with meditation, stress induced triggers for hypertension and diabetes are mitigated. Homas and mantra rituals create energetic balance, lowering mental stress that manifests physically. The combined effect reduces disease risk and supports community health sustainably. Now, how does a regular satsang remove doubts, worries, and fears? The satsang provides a collective vibration and guidance. Listening to wisdom, chanting, and sharing experiences fosters clarity. Students leave mentally higher and lighter, emotionally balanced, and courageously oriented toward action. Temple rituals and homas amplify this effect energetically. The community receives shared protection, reducing collective anxiety and reinforcing disciplined living. Now, how do the art of living and the Vedic system coordinate to promote drug-free youth? The breath, meditation, yoga, and awareness programs strengthen willpower, enabling you to resist peer pressure and substance abuse naturally. Temple-based rituals, homas, and mantra practices stabilize mind and character. The Panchavati environment support healthy lungs and reduce chemical exposure, reinforcing the drug-free resolve. Now, how is a 1 minute meditation sufficient to create long-term behavioral change? There, the 1 minute serves as an entry point for experience based learning. Daily repetition rewires the nervous system, creating resilience, clarity, and emotional stability over time. Ritual integration reinforces this practice. Collective 1 minute meditation in temples or schools' assemblies cultivate shared discipline, promoting village wide behavioral transformation. Now, how do these combined spiritual and practical interventions create ideal villages as Gurudev envisions? Neither the blend of yoga, meditation, breathwork, and awareness programs produces physically healthy, emotionally balanced, and mentally alert citizens. Education, health, and youth empowerment converge. Temple adoption, Panchavati plantations, homas, and mantras integrate environmental, spiritual, and ethical dimensions. Together, they generate a sustainable culture of cleanliness, health, courage, joy, and communal harmony, fulfilling Gurudev's vision of ideal villages. Now, Gurudev spoke about the significance of gratitude in meditation. How does practicing gratitude daily influence mental and physical health? The gratitude has a profound neurobiological impact. When a student or a villager focuses on thankfulness, the brain releases dopamine and serotonin, generating a sense of happiness and reducing stress hormones like cortisol. In practical terms, someone who meditates with gratitude experiences improved heart rate variability, deeper sleep, and enhanced immunity. The practice also restructures perception. Difficulties are viewed as temporary learning experiences rather than permanent threats. Villagers learn to celebrate small victories, whether it's the growth of a crop, a successful school day, or community cooperation. Gratitude meditation fosters resilience against anxiety and depression, encourages optimism, and creates a habitual positive outlook. In the temple context, gratitude is amplified through rituals, homas, and prasada. Participating in collective offerings and acknowledging the blessings of the divine creates both emotional and energetic realignment. This collective gratitude fosters social harmony and reduces interpersonal friction as people recognize interdependence and shared well being. A community practicing gratitude regularly experiences lowered conflict, improved cooperation in environmental and health initiatives, and increased receptivity to spiritual teachings. Physiologically, these practices reduce Now, how does the adoption of a temple create a protective and inspiring environment for children? Then the adopt temple functions as a microcosm of safe, structured, and uplifting energy. Children visiting regularly experience consistent exposure to calmness, focus, and ethical narratives embedded in rituals. This reduces stress, encourages disciplined behavior, and cultivates fearlessness. The rituals, the mantras, and homas in the temple create a vibration that supports the mental stability. The children internalize this energy, which acts as a protective shield against negative influences, promoting confidence, emotional regulation, and moral growth. Gurudev emphasized integrating yoga and meditation into daily routines. How does this address rising lifestyle diseases in villages? The lifestyle diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and heart disorders are often stress induced. Yoga improves circulation, regulates metabolism, and balances the nervous system. Daily practices ensures a consistent physiological support, preventing disease onset. Temple rituals and environmental measures like Panchavati planting and anti-plastic campaigns further improve air quality and immunity. When villagers combine physical practice with sacred routines, overall health significantly improves. Now, how does the Sudarshan Kriya help in transforming worry into productive energy? Jagadav Sudarshan Kriya regulates the breath patterns, synchronizes mind body rhythm, and induces a relaxed, alert state. Worryful energy is metabolized into calmness, focus, and clarity, turning potential stress into purposeful action. When combined with mantra and Homa practices, Sudarshan Kriya reinforces the energetic and psychological field of protection. People feel secure, supported, and more capable of addressing life challenges without fear. Now, Gurudev highlighted the collective efforts for health and environment. How does teamwork enhance the effectiveness of spiritual practices? Jagadev group yoga, meditation, and satsang produce stronger vibrational resonance, boosting morale, focus, and adherence to practice. Villagers supporting each other create a self reinforcing system of well being. The collective rituals and homas amplify energetic impact. Environmental campaigns like Panchavati planting succeed faster when community participation is strong, integrating spirituality into practical sustainability. Now, how does teaching yoga and meditation in schools influence future generations? Students develop self discipline, focus, emotional intelligence, and resilience. Habits formed in childhood persist into adulthood, reducing anxiety, improving learning outcomes, and promoting healthy lifestyles. Temple based rituals and collective practices complement school comforts and efforts, instilling values of devotion, gratitude, and environmental stewardship. Children emerge as balanced, conscious future leaders. Now, Gurudev has stressed the importance of fearlessness. How is fearlessness cultivated through spiritual and practical interventions? Negative breath, meditation, and mindfulness practices train the nervous system to respond rather than react. Fear loses power as students experience repeated success in controlling mind and emotions. The prasada, the homas, and the mantras create energetic feel. Villagers develop courage, confidence, inner stability, allowing them to confront personal and societal challenges with their composure. Now, how do environmental initiatives like anti plastic burning and clean villages contribute to spiritual practice? Jagadev, environmental care improves air quality, reduces toxins, and enhances meditation effectiveness. Clear surroundings facilitate calmness and concentration, making spiritual practices more profound. These measures align with the dharmic principles of ahimsa and stewardship. The rituals, the planting, and environmental discipline reinforce moral awareness, linking spiritual growth with ecological responsibility. Now, how does integrating mantra and homa with yoga create holistic wellness? The mantra stabilize the mind, reduce stress, and synchronize breath. The homa rituals create vibrational harmony. Combined with yoga, they address physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual layers simultaneously. The temple becomes a center where collective energy, ethical values, and environmental care converge. Villagers experience improved health, emotional resilience, and a profound sense of protection. Gurudev emphasized leaving villages healthy, clean, and joyful. How do these combined practices ensure lasting transformation? The daily yoga, meditation, breathwork, and gratitude create enduring mental and physical health. Students and adults learn sustainable habits which perpetuate well being across generations. Temple adoption, punctuality planting, homas, and rituals discipline integrate spiritual, ecological, and social dimensions. Villages evolve into ideal environments where health, courage, joy, and ethical living become the norm, fulfilling Gurudev's vision. Now, Gurudev spoke about life as a lamp and the inevitability of death. How do meditation and spiritual practices help one approach death with sincerity and serenity? There, the metaphor of life as a lamp is both symbolic and practical. Meditation and breath-based practices train the mind to observe without clinging. Regular practices teach us that thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations are transient. Villagers and students learn to witness anxiety, attachment, and fear without being overwhelmed. This cultivates inner stability, making the inevitability of a death less intimidating. Practitioners internalize the idea that life's quality depends on the clarity and joy in each moment, not on fear of the future. The temple rituals, the homas, and the mantra chanting reinforce the psychological preparation. By participating in collective rituals, villagers experience the presence of higher consciousness, which instills trust and fearlessness. Prasada and sacred fire symbolize the continuity and purification, reminding everyone that leaving the body is a transition rather than an end. These practices create a culture where life is celebrated and death is approached with dignity and acceptance. Now, how do the collective satsangs reduce individual stress and improve community cohesion? There, the satsangs provide a feel of collective vibration. Listening to spiritual discourse, chanting, and meditating together synchronizes heartbeats and reduces stress. People feel less isolated, creating emotional support system. The temple homas and mantras amplify the collective energy. Shared intention strengthens social bonds, reduces conflicts, and builds a unified approach toward ethical and ecological initiatives in the villages. Now, Gurudev emphasized faith and trust in divine support. How does this shape the decision making in villages? The faith acts as a cognitive stabilizer. Meditation enables villagers to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. When faced with challenges, decisions are guided by clarity and ethical principles rather than fear. Ritual participation reinforces faith experientially. Villagers internalize that their efforts are supported by higher consciousness, boosting courage, consistency, and long term commitment to community development. How do yoga, meditation, and environmental care reduce the incidence of lung diseases? The breath focused practices strengthen respiratory muscles, enhance oxygen uptake, and regulate the lung function. Combined with anti-plastic burning awareness, villagers breathe cleaner air, lowering the risk of respiratory awareness and illnesses. Panchavatty trees purify air naturally. The Homa spoke rituals carefully manage, purify localized air, and create a conscious culture of clean surroundings, directly protecting respiratory health. Now, how does teaching children about ecology, yoga, and meditation together build lifelong resilience? Integrating these practices in school nurtures body mind balance, environmental consciousness, and ethical behavior. Children develop self regulation, empathy, and adaptability, traits that persist into adulthood. Temple based rituals reinforce environmental respect and discipline. Observing ethical care for nature and participating in rituals teaches children interconnectedness, responsibility, and spiritual grounding. Now, how do breath based kriyas enhance willpower against addiction and distractions? The Bhastrika and Sudarshan Kriya improve autonomic regulation, reduce stress, and enhance prefrontal cortex functioning. This strengthens focus, self control, and the ability to resist cravings. The mantra chanting and Homa participation further stabilize the mind, creating a protective, energetic feel. Youth who combine these practices are more likely to embrace healthy lifestyles. Now, Gurudev stressed that the cheerful and serene living. How is this achievable in rural, resource limited settings? Yeah, the meditation, gratitude, and yoga are accessible practices requiring minimal resources. Regular practices cultivates inner joy that is independent of material circumstances, teaching villagers to remain serene amidst challenges. Temples, collective prayers, and community rituals provide a supportive ecosystem. Emotional support and shared spiritual engagement reinforce sustained carefulness, cheerfulness, and resilience. Now, how do the collective rituals and homas strengthen ethical awareness in villages? The regular participation in rituals instills habits of discipline, self reflection, and accountability. Children and adults internalize the moral conduct. to repeated experiential learning. Homas connect the ethical behavior to visible outcomes in the environment and health. Observing cause and effect in ritual context deepens the moral responsibility. Now, how does the meditation improve learning outcomes in schools? Meditation enhances the attention span, memory retention, and emotional regulation. Students become calmer, more focused, and responsive, translating into higher academic performance and collaborative learning. Temple based mantras and communal practice amplify mental clarity. Ethical lessons, discipline, and focus cultivated during rituals complement schools' learning, producing holistic educational development. How do Panchavati plantations combined with spiritual practices create a model for ideal villages? Now, the trees improve oxygen, nutrition, and ecological balance. When combined with meditation and yoga, villagers' physical and mental health improves, creating sustainable well-being. Temples and rituals anchor the ethical and spiritual dimensions. Panchavati becomes a living symbol of dharmic balance, reinforcing responsibility, communal care, and environmental stewardship, achieving Gurudev's vision of ideal and joyful villages everywhere.